Good afternoon. We're back with another Marvel Snap video, and today is a patch day, so we're going to be going over the patch notes for today, April 18th, 2023. Not going to bury the lead. It's mostly good in this patch. So let's dive in and take a look. We've got an update to the token shop. When a new Series 5 card is released, it will be immediately featured in its own section for the first week. Let's take a look at that. So here is the weekly spotlight. And then also the Series 4-5 section and the Ultimate Variant section. Looks great. No problem with that at all. That's a very positive change. Ultimate Variants are some of the most epic variants in the game. They deserve their own section. And then the Series 4 and 5 section. Okay. We made some updates to our game board. Check out the new art and FX. Seasonal series drops. Some cards have been dropped down to lower series. Ghost, Stature, and MODOK to Series 4. Stature may be worth picking up for 3K. I'm not sure. Probably depends on whether you have all the big bads or not. If you do, I'd say Stature is probably the best value. Cards dropping from Series 4 to Series 3. Shuri, Bast, Valkyrie, Super Skrull, Black Panther. Those are all winners. All really, really good cards. Bast is probably the one I want the most, followed by Valkyrie, followed by Super Skrull, because I already have Black Panther and Shuri. I do think Super Skrull is still a really good card. It's the least of these that dropped, which are all really, really good cards. General updates. Players that reach infinite rank will only match against other infinite rank players. A very interesting change. Speaking as a player that is infinite rank and has been since April 8th or so this month, infinite players don't always take the game very seriously. When I've been climbing, I've run into infinite players that just donated me cubes or were playing really goofy decks. I think players who were climbing thought that this change would make it easier, but I'm not convinced that's the case. It may, in some cases, make it easier if you are facing off against infinite players, and the assumption is these players are better than me, and therefore facing them is, or they have, maybe not better than me, but these players have much higher collection levels than me, and therefore it's not fair for me to face them. Oh yeah, I agree with that. So if you have like rank 30 or 40 or 50 players facing infinite players, that's not good. But I don't think you needed to make it so that infinite rank players would only match against other infinite rank players. You could have said, like, okay, if you get into the 80s and 90s, you're going to face infinite rank players. But below that, or let's say below 70, you don't face infinite rank players. I think that would have been a better change. Because 70 to 100 rank players may actually want to face infinite players in some situations. If you're facing an infinite player that's just goofing around or trying out different decks or flat out donating cubes, that could actually help you. I think from ranks 30 to 70, this is a very good change. From ranks 70 to 100, might actually make things more difficult. We'll see. And for players that are already at infinite, does that mean we're going to face bots a lot more? I guess I'll have to test and see. Or are we just going to face the same player over and over and over and over? We'll see. When you tap on a card for more details, the card detail screen now features new information. Okay, cool. When inspecting cards in game, you can now flip them to see the card back in full detail. Okay. After roughly 10 hours of gameplay in a day, players will stop earning Season Pass XP from gameplay for the remainder of the day. Probably doesn't affect too many people. I would guess that's to stop like Agatha bot farming or something. Like 24-hour Agatha bot farming. Audio, new card sounds for Squirrel Girl, new location sounds for Camp Lehigh, VO support for Tai. Okay. In the wake of our last balance change, we saw the metagame settle into a much healthier shape than it had been before. What? By whose standard? Are you guys nuts? Each patch for like the last 4 patches has gotten progressively worse. However, we were too shallow with our adjustments to the Shuri Taskmaster decks. Yeah, because you didn't nerf Shuri. And Lockjaw Leech shells, both with and without Thanos. I didn't think anybody was calling for a nerf to Lockjaw Leech, just Thanos. But okay. Have remained solid contenders. Today's changes, people definitely wanted Leech hit. I don't think many people were thinking Lockjaw should be hit. Today's changes aim to push both of these decks off their clear top spots. Outside of Shuri Taskmaster, the metagame is looking healthy on our internal metrics. Yeah, but okay. It's like, aside from that asteroid that's headed for Earth, everything is going really well here. Like, yeah, but the Shuri Taskmaster was a really big deal. Anyway, whatever. Shuri, let's get into the changes. Shuri, previously 4-2 on reveal, double the power of the next card you play. She is now 4-2 on reveal. If you play your next card here, double its power. Okay, that's a good change to Shuri. That introduces opportunity for more counterplay. That will make Arrow a hard counter to Shuri, because typically you play Shuri on turn 4, and then you play your Red Skull on turn 5. Well, you can also play Arrow on turn 5, the opponent can, and Shuri's not a very strong tempo play because she only offers 2 power, so often the Shuri deck doesn't have initiative, which means that Arrow can pull a card away from the Shuri lane, and that card will not get the Shuri doubling, which makes Arrow now a hard counter to Shuri. And also makes it so that you can't play the doubled card on a Cosmo lane. So that's a big nerf to Shuri, and a needed nerf, and kind of preserves the essence of Shuri, so I like that change a lot. I think it will accomplish their objective. And I wish they had been willing to do that earlier, but, you know, Shuri's Series 3 today, so now it's open season on nerfing her. And that's a big nerf. And a good change. We considered a number of changes to Shuri, but they all tended to ruin her current decks. Some even theoretically risked making a new monster with different parts. The change we're making today may seem small and subtle, it doesn't, but we expect it to be impactful, it will be, and retain the same flow of play for her existing decks, it won't. Which is a consistent goal in our balance philosophy, so none of those goals were achieved, but if their overall goal was to nerf Shuri, then good job. That will do it. This nerf removes Cosmo's protective capacity for her target, makes single card answers like Valkyrie easy to aim, and indirectly buffs lane control elements like Professor X. I mean, I don't see how that buffs Professor X necessarily. You wouldn't want to play Professor X on a Shuri lane. You would just lose it. I'm not entirely sure what their thinking is there. We're taking a risk here in that this nerf can leave Shuri still a strength outlier. No, it won't, because there's now a hard counter to it, and that is Arrow. Arrow was kind of a soft counter to Shuri before. Before Arrow's nerf. Now I would say Arrow is a very hard counter to Shuri, and if you're ever having trouble with Shuri in the meta, just play an Arrow deck, and you won't anymore. You see the Shuri, you have initiative, you snap, you play your Arrow, and they lose. Or at least have a much harder time of winning. Because Shuri says, if you play your next card here, double its power. If you don't play your next card there, you just lose the opportunity for the buff entirely. It's not like you can then play another card on that lane the next turn and gain the buff. You're done if you miss with the Shuri lane. So Arrow's a hard counter, and in combination with it not working with Cosmo, this will remove Shuri as a problem from the meta. And it's very interesting that they were concerned that this wouldn't be enough. Doesn't give me great confidence in their thinking concerning balance, but the right change was made, so can't complain. Leech. Previously, 5-3 on reveal. Remove the abilities from all cards in your opponent's hand. Now reads, at the start of turn 6, remove all abilities from cards in your opponent's hand. So it's no longer an on-reveal, neither is it an ongoing ability. This is a good change. It's never been our goal for Leech to be a heavily played card, and we understand that's been a frustration lately, correct? When it's happening, it usually means a finisher is generically strong against pure power, like Leech Leader, or a deck can play Leech earlier than turn 5 too often. I agree with that completely. That is, I don't think Leech is very good on his own in his old form. I think he needed Lockjaw to be good, or Electro. We've tried in the past to weaken the stronger cards in those decks, but it's been a balance and design obstacle, thus we've decided to remove the early Leech from the equation. Excellent. Leech is designed to counter some powerful endgame cards and combinations from a unique angle without any setup, which is important to have around in the event those decks begin to overperform, or you could just be better at balancing. Anyway, this change should let him fulfill that role when necessary without ever making him a foundational piece of the metagame. I don't think Leech is good when he's played on turn 5 for 5 energy. I think he was only really good with Lockjaw, and I think you only really saw him in Lockjaw decks. So I think this will functionally remove Leech from the meta. You'll see it from time to time. You'll have the opportunity to, well, you won't have the opportunity to play around if it's played on turn 5. You may still see it in Electro decks. I don't know that it's even worth a slot in Electro decks, though. I think probably not for me. So I think this will functionally remove Leech from the meta, and let's have a round of applause for that, and not a moment too soon. Lockjaw. After you play a card here, swap it with a card in your deck. And it now reads, after you play a card here, swap it with a card in your deck once per turn. Lockjaw is a fun and exciting card, but each trigger of this good boy basically draws a card and generates up to 6 energy at random. It doesn't basically draw a card, but you do get a free on reveal. And it doesn't really generate up to 6 energy at random. Sometimes it's worse than that. Sometimes it generates 3 energy, or sometimes 6 energy, but that's a high roll. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 energy. Sometimes it's no energy, but doesn't really draw a card. But anyway, that's kind of nitpicking. That's a lot of variance to have in multiple competitive decks. As we add cards, new and improved ways to sidestep Lockjaw's risk will also become available. Fair enough. Since we believe the most powerful and frustrating use of Lockjaw is triggering him multiple times in a turn, often with a snap along the way, we're changing that. Limiting Lockjaw to 1 swap each turn forces the player to develop their board without letting them sprint ahead or spring a late surprise. This will make Lockjaw simpler to play against and less potent in decks incidentally playing lots of cheap cards like Thanos. Yep, that's a big nerf to Thanos. I think the version of Thanos I'm seeing most often at Infinite isn't the Lockjaw version anymore, it's the Deathwave version. So it won't affect that version, but it is a big nerf to Thanos. It's also a big nerf to Mighty Thor Lockjaw, and a big nerf to the Dracula Lockjaw that I was playing a couple of months ago. It's interesting, every deck that I've made it to Infinite with for the last 4 months has now been nerfed. I made it with Zabu, Zabu counter cards deck. Zabu got nerfed. I made it with Lockjaw Dracula. Lockjaw's now been nerfed. I made it with the Moon Girl She-Hulk Quinjet deck. 2 of those cards got nerfed, and I made it this month with Shuri Nimrod Destroyer, and that's now been nerfed. Though actually I don't think the nerf would affect that particular deck that much. It might a little. But anyway, that's off topic. Well, I'm sad to see the Mighty Thor deck get nerfed. I do like the Thanos getting nerfed, though. And as has been their pattern so far, they didn't want to nerf Thanos by actually nerfing Thanos because they don't want to nerf their Series 5 or 4 cards. That's become exceedingly clear every patch. And so they decided to nerf Lockjaw, and in the process of nerfing a Series 3 card, as has been the case every time they've done it, there's collateral damage for free-to-play decks. And that's sad. But nerfing Thanos, overall, I like this change. I think it makes the meta better. And the main reason that I think it makes the meta better is because I don't think Leech is good without Lockjaw, and I think this helps to remove Leech from the meta. So even though we also lose the Mighty Thor deck, I think getting rid of Leech is so important to me that I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And I think this change Okay, nerfing Thanos I don't really care that much about, because I think Thanos does have some counters, in particular Killmonger, but nerfing Leech, yes, and I do think Lockjaw needed to be hit in order for the Leech nerf to really stick, unless they changed Leech more dramatically than they did. So these two changes, Lockjaw and Leech, I think need to be looked at together, and I'm in favor of them because they remove Leech from the meta. At least I believe they will, and I love, love, love that. Goodbye, Leech, you won't be missed. America Chavez. Previously, you always draw this card on turn 6 and not before. Now starts on the bottom of your deck, draw this on turn 6. That's a big nerf to Cable. That makes Cable virtually useless. Cable's stats aren't that good. The drawing the card from your opponent's deck is okay, but the main thing that Cable does is give you information, and now against any deck with America Chavez, all of the information you're going to get is that they have America Chavez, and that really doesn't help because so many decks run America Chavez, it tells you almost nothing. So that's a big nerf to Cable, and I expect will functionally remove Cable from the meta. I don't know if that's necessarily what they were aiming for. They said they did it because it restricts their ability to print cards that interact with the top of your deck. Okay, they should have made it so she goes to the middle of the deck and stays there. We expect this update to have little effect on America Chavez's functionality. Yeah, it doesn't have any effect on her really, but it does affect Cable in a big way. So, lack of foresight there, I think, unless they were intending to hit Cable. Jubilee. On reveal, add a card from your deck to this location. On change to add the top card of your deck to this location. Okay, that doesn't matter. They just want to design cards that interact with the top of their deck, so this doesn't really affect anything that I can see. Leader. On reveal, copy all your cards your opponent played to the location right of here, but on your side. It has now been changed to a 6/2. On reveal, copy the enemy cards with the highest power played this turn, but on your side. I love that change. Absolutely love it. We were clearly too harsh on Leader with his previous nerf, and we're dismayed that action became a go-to example of how ruinous a nerf can be. Okay. Our balanced philosophy is to preserve as much playability as we reasonably can when weakening cards, and we didn't succeed here previously. True. With this change, we're aiming to bring his strength back up to a playable spot for a 6-cost card, but still avoid the oppressive impact his original form had. We have erred on the cautious side with his power for now, because some previous defenses against the original Leader, such as playing weaker cards before a strong one, no longer apply. I like this change. I think this also counters Shuri in a big way. Another thing they could have done is say copy all cards played at this location. I think what they did is even stronger than that. This is also going to be a very good card in Mr. Negative at 6/2. But this new Leader in combination with the Shuri change just dumpsters Shuri. Not going to see her anymore. I think the new Leader fits best probably in Doomwave decks or Sandman decks, where you gain initiative early and then you play your Sandman or your Wave so your opponent can only play one card or maybe two, and then you Leader and you win. I think he'll be very good in that. Very, very good. Sandman, Wave, and Mr. Negative are the primary homes that I see for Leader, and I'm excited to try him in those decks. I think he'll be very strong in those decks. He'll probably be good in a wide variety of decks, to be honest. You may see a return of the Leader Arrow type decks, but I think they'll usually be played with Wave and or Sandman now. Overall, I think we'll see a much better meta without Leech or Shuri in it. Much, much better meta. And I'm sad they felt they had to wait until Shuri was Series 3 in order to make the change, but at least the change was made. RIP to Jane Jaw. But your sacrifice was not in vain, as it removes Leech from the meta. So, what decks will be good after this new nerf? I think Sandman will be very good. I think any combo deck got better. Mr. Negative, Hitmonkey got better with the absence of Leech. Assuming that all of the Leech players don't just switch to Sandman, and they might. We'll have to see how the meta goes at Infinite now that Infinite players only play other Infinite players. But overall, I'm very happy with this patch. This is the first patch since I started playing the game where I could say that. And they did a major buff, they did a major nerf to a free-to-play friendly deck in the Lockjaw decks. But it also came with a buff to a pay-to-win deck, the Thanos deck, or a nerf, and also came with a nerf to the Shuri deck, which is no longer a pay-to-win deck, but it was. And it also came with a big buff for free-to-play players in the leader buff. So, good job, developers. I don't agree with some of your comments or reasoning, but I do agree with the outcome. It's a very good outcome for players. And I think this improves the meta. So we got a variety of bug fixes, some something for Kang there, that's nice. If the game would crash less often when I play Kang, that'd be great. I don't see anything else there that really affects gameplay too much, so overall, a very good patch. Good news for players. After wandering in the desert for the last couple of months, we have found an oasis, it seems. So thank you for watching.